Hi teachers, my name is Sarah Smith. Welcome back to Lead to Teach. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Sarah, I thought you said your last video was the last video. And that is true. I did say that, but I realized about 2 minutes after I finished recording, Sarah, you know teachers well enough to know that their question is going to be, yeah, but what if I'm doing everything you're recommending for these whole group classroom management strategies and it's still not enough to help that one kid? And that's a very valid question. So today's session is entirely devoted to how do you help that one kid who isn't responding to whole group classroom management strategies. I will tell you, this in and of itself could be its own entire playlist. There's a lot to this, but I'm hoping to give you just enough of an overview that you would know the next step you could take in order to help somebody who struggles behaviorally in your classroom. Guided notes for this session are at leadtoteach.com, but I want to just remind you who I am, because I feel like anytime somebody is making behavioral recommendations, especially for children, you want to know what is your background. So I am a former teacher. I taught first grade for 10 years. During that time, I went back to grad school and did an advanced degree in a field called applied behavior analysis. So if it matters to you, I am a board certified behavior analyst, which is just a fancy way of saying that I've been trained to diagnose and intervene on problem behavior for kids. I'm also an instructional coach, which means that I go into other teachers' classrooms and I support them in areas of classroom management and instruction. I focus primarily on grades K2, but the strategies that I'm recommending today could be used in any elementary age kid, and I would feel comfortable recommending the strategies. Your tone of voice, remember, will always change depending on the age of the student, but the principles are sound. Okay, so I want to remind you of Gage. Do you remember Gage? We talked about him in a former session. He was my kiddo that arrived the 10th day of school, and from the get-go, he was a defiant kiddo. He behaved very non-compliantly. I remember that very first day I asked him to scoot up and put his hands on top of his desk so that I could tell he was listening, and he did the exact opposite. He slid back and swiped his paper and said, "No, I don't want to." And that was pretty typical. I learned quickly that it was typical for him to react angrily, to react aggressively, to be overly emotional. But I think it's important to acknowledge what he had working for him too. So this was a kiddo who caught on really quickly, a really bright student academically. He had supportive parents who wanted to help, who wanted to be involved. They just weren't quite sure what to do. And then he also wanted to interact with peers. It was important to him that he be social and that he be accepted by them. So we're going to use Gage as our poster child for kids who struggle with behavior. Okay, so principle number 1, I'm going to give you 3 principles and then 5 steps within one of those principles in order to help kiddos like this. Principle number 1 is that some kids need additional support in order to succeed. That is just true. Another way of saying that is that we should help kids behaviorally just like we do physically or academically or emotionally. I think about if you had a kiddo who was wheelchair bound and could not access a house because of that wheelchair, because of that disability, you wouldn't hesitate to put a wheelchair ramp leading up to the house, right? Because we would want them to be able to access the same environment that all the other kids could access. But sometimes we hesitate to help kids behaviorally because we view it as a character deficit rather than a skill deficit. And we say, well, they're just being lazy. They're just defiant. Their parents just didn't know how to raise them. And what we want to do is shift our mindset to say, if I had a kiddo who was struggling academically, I would put some supports in place. Can I do the same thing behaviorally? Here's what the research tells us, okay, is that there will be kids who struggle despite strong classroom management for the whole group. Hill Walker is the first one who came up with what is now known as the Multi-Tiered Systems of Support Framework, MTSS model. And what the research shows is that about 80 to 85% of kids will respond to whole group classroom management strategies, but there will still be another 10 to 15% of kids who need something a little more, and another 3 to 5% of kids who will need something even beyond that, who will need something more individualized. So don't feel badly if you're in this place where you need additional support for a kid. That's pretty typical. However, can I be really, really clear in saying helping that one kid requires that the bottom of the pyramid be really solidly in place first. In other words, you have to have really strong whole group classroom management strategies in place before anything I'm going to recommend further up the pyramid would work. I was in a classroom just a couple of days ago, actually, where this one little kiddo struggles more than any of the other kiddos. And I was called in to see if I could figure out what else we could do for this kiddo so that he could be successful behaviorally, because he's behaving angrily, he's got a lot of emotional outbursts, he's non-compliant, he's not completing work. And as I was in there, I realized the rest of the class is also noisy. He just happens to be noisier. And so I told the teacher, this is a tier 1 problem. Like, until we get the whole group managed, we can't expect him to be quiet and compliant when the rest of the environment is still noisy and chaotic. Another way of saying that, one of my colleagues always says, you cannot tier 2 your way out of a tier 1 problem. So that's all I'm going to say about that, but it is a really, really important precursor that you have strong classroom management in place for the whole group before you begin to climb the pyramid. Okay, principle number 2. Principle number 1, some kids need additional support. Principle number 2 is, before you can give that support, before you can help those kids, you must understand their behavior. Where are they coming from? Here's what the research tells us, is that there's 2 major functions of behavior, or in other words, reasons that their problem behavior occurs. The first is for attention. And the definition there is that the student wants to be noticed by adults or peers with positive, or, here's the scary one, negative acknowledgement. In other words, I don't care if you're praising me or if you're reprimanding me, as long as you're looking at me, as long as you're interacting with me, I'll take it. I always think of it as attention is attention is attention is attention. Positive or negative, it does not matter. We call that attention maintained behavior. The attention is maintaining the problem behavior. Okay, the next major function of behavior that I'll just briefly touch on is known as escape, which means that the student wants to avoid or even just delay a task that he or she finds aversive. In other words, maybe I will swipe my paper off my desk knowing that you're going to make me do it later and being held accountable for that. But if I can even just delay having to complete that task, that's enough. So we call that escape maintained behavior. I'm engaging in the problem behavior in order to escape a task at hand. Okay, then there's the dreaded double whammy, dun dun dun, which is when the student seeks for attention and escape. It's attention and escape maintained problem behavior. And those are hard, and unfortunately, that's where most of our kids fall, is into that overlapped category. Statistically, here's what we're looking at, is that this red portion shows escape. About 48% of problem behavior occurs as kids seek escape from an aversive task. About 45.1% of problem behavior occurs as kids seek for attention, remember, from adults or peers. And then you're wondering what these other 2 slivers of the pie are. I'll just briefly mention that's sensory at 3.9%, or can I just round to 4? 4% of problem behavior occurs because kids have a sensory deficit and are seeking additional stimulation. And 2.9%, or I'll round to 3%, of problem behavior occurs because kids are seeking access to some sort of tangible. They want something. But attention and escape, those are the big kahunas that drive the majority of problem behavior we see in kids. And it's why these common consequences don't often work. Have you heard move your stick down? We've got a chart with all the kids' names on it, and the kids move their sticks up or down, or their cards up or down based on their behavior. If you have a kiddo who is struggling behaviorally, move their stick down in the face of problem behavior, you're giving them attention. But Sarah, it's negative attention. It doesn't matter, right? Attention is attention is attention is attention for these kids. When we say things like, okay, then I'm writing your name on the board and now you owe me recess. What are we giving the kid? We're inadvertently giving them public attention. We're reinforcing the very behavior we're trying to squash as we give kids attention for it. Okay, if you won't do your work, then you can go to the hall. Ugh. That would be heavy escape and attention. Escape because now I'm getting out of the classroom environment. Even if I have to do the work later, I'm still delaying that work, right? And attention from people in the hall who don't know that the student is perhaps receiving a consequence. So they wave and they smile and they interact and give eye contact. And we've just reinforced the behavior without meaning to, but we did. What about dialoguing? Why don't you want to do your work today? Can you talk to me? Can you tell me what's wrong? That would be attention and escape as we're delaying the task at hand. What about a reprimand? Well, how old are you? Because you're acting like you're in preschool. That's a reprimand, that's attention. Fine, then you can go to the office. That one is maybe the worst of all, because research shows that the office is probably the most reinforcing area in a school building for the rich escape and attention it provides to the kids as staff, as administrators, as parents, secretaries, as anybody comes through the office and interacts with the child. So the question always becomes then, okay, well then what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to help a kiddo who struggles behaviorally if I'm not supposed to use any of those consequences for the sake of giving the kid attention and escape? Here's step one. Remember I told you there's going to be 5. Here's step 1 of how you help kiddos like this, is you determine the most problematic behaviors first. And I'm going to give you a rule that you have to limit it to no more than 3. And that's not my rule. That's in the research. It's recommended that you pick no more than 3 problematic behaviors. So I did this with Gage, and here's what I found. Here were the problem behaviors in which he was engaging. He was not following directions. He was really overly emotional when I asked him to do something he didn't want to. He used really hostile language toward me, toward other adults, toward peers. He called out during class, interrupted instruction vocally all the time. He was really aggressive toward other kids, especially like on the playground or in the lunchroom or in the bathroom, areas that were not as heavily supervised by adults. He was really loud in the bathroom, a lot of screaming and vocalizing, not getting his work done, throwing objects, whatever happened to be in front of him at the time the outburst happened, and being out of seat, just wandering around the classroom as he avoided doing his work. Okay, that's quite a list, right? But if I have to pick the 3 that are the most challenging, here's what I would say. Not following directions, very first problem, very first most problematic problem, because I can't tell him to do anything and have him do it. Next would be probably using hostile language, because it's putting such a wall between other adults and peers and himself, right? He's not able to successfully interact with the adults and the peers and get the attention that I know he wants. And then probably last was that aggressing toward others, because it creates an unsafe environment. So big list, but if you have to pick your top 3, what are they? These were my top 3. Okay, step 2 then is springboarded from step 1, that after I've identified the 3 most problematic behaviors, or 2 or 3, right? Then I'm going to clarify replacement behaviors. What do I want the kiddo to do instead? And again, no more than 3, because we have to keep it simple and manageable for the kid. So here's what I picked for Gage. I said, if he struggles with compliance, I want him to learn to follow directions the first time. If he struggles with hostile language and being really loud when he shouldn't be, then I want him to use kind words or use an appropriate mouth. If he is struggling with aggression, then I want him to learn to keep his hands and feet to himself. And so I put that in icon form on a chart that I'll show you in just a minute, but the finger stands for follow my directions the first time. Use kind words is what the lips are, and then hands and feet, of course, would be keep your hands and feet to yourself. And then we're going to put these icons in tracker form, which is just another way of saying that we're going to put them on a chart that allows us to track the student's behavior across a day and over time. So for Gage, what I expected of him in writing is that he would follow my directions, use kind words, keep hands and feet to himself. I expect those same 3 behaviors when we go to reading groups, and again at recess, and during phonics, and during a read aloud, and lunch, and math, and prep, and math small groups, and recess, and science, and then other. And other could have been like an assembly, or a fire drill, or a guest speaker, or if we didn't have other during the day, nothing special going on, I would just count that as the time before school, his morning work. And I expect those same 3 behaviors all day long. Okay. Let's just take a quick look at the tracker here to be sure we're hitting a couple of really important components to use these successfully. Letter A is you want to use icons, especially for your kiddos who are not reading yet. And even if they were reading, I would still attach icons to the tracker because it's just a simple way to communicate expectations. So that's why the use of icons, but then I'm still going to vocally explain the expectations. When Gage arrived at school the first day that we put this tracker in place, I sat with him one-on-one and explained to him what it looks like to follow directions the first time in phonics. That means if we're going through our cards and I ask you to scoot your chair up, that you scoot your chair up. And if I ask you to say the cards with me, you say, okay, and you do the cards with me. If I ask you to keep your hands and feet to yourself at recess, it means that you're not pushing Layla in line and you're not stepping on the heels of Tommy. It means that you're just walking with your hands and feet to yourself. You're not touching anyone else. If I ask you to use kind words during a read aloud, it means that you're not shouting out and commenting on what the story says. You're just listening politely and quietly unless I ask you to say something, and then you're doing it in the voice that I ask for. So you have to vocally explain what this looks like in addition to the icons. And then we're going to have the student choose the reinforcer. Because why would they want to engage in any of this if there's nothing to work for, right? So the next part says, I am working for blank, and we're going to show the kid a menu of reinforcers that he or she can choose. I'll show you that in just a minute. And then we're going to set a numerical goal to let the kiddo know, okay, what you have to do then is implement these behaviors, right? You have to follow directions, use kind words, keep hands and feet to self. And as you do that, and as I see you doing that, I will let you mark a smile in the box for that subject at the end of the subject. You and I will check in, and if that's happened, I'll let you mark a smile. And Engage initially started with 2 goals. He had an AM goal and a PM goal. That's why there's 2 lines here. And I'm the one setting the parameters, saying, okay, I think he could maybe be successful maybe for 3 of these boxes in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. So I'm saying, Gage, do you want to pick 2 or 3? How many smiles do you want to work for in the morning, 2 or 3? And if he says 5, I say, okay, you can choose 5 in your head, but I'm going to write 3 on the line. And I'm still picking based on what I think I know he can handle. So that's the within teacher given parameters. Okay. Doing this in tracker form ties to which Big 5 strategy have you already identified? And of course, it's clarifying expectations, right? Being super clear about what you want this kiddo to do in order to be successful behaviorally. But I'm hoping you recall expectations have to be supported by feedback in order to maintain. Do you remember that? We have to give affirmative feedback. Remember, we praise whenever kids meet expectations, and corrective feedback as needed. So can we just talk about affirmative feedback for just a minute? That leads to step 3, which is that we're going to begin to reinforce compliance. As the kid exhibits the replacement behaviors, then we are going to reinforce or strengthen that replacement behavior. So remember, there's 4 categories that we're looking at for affirmative feedback. There's the non-contingent, which is relationship building, things like greeting the student or making a phone call home just to say, I love your kid, calling the kiddo a pet name. There's the non-vocal category, or sometimes we call that the affection, the body language. So things like fist bumps or winks, or I walk by and pat the kid's shoulder, just something to make some sort of physical connection with the kid. Then the 2 we're going to look at the most carefully for kids that struggle behaviorally is for next the vocal category, which would be praise, right? I'm going to praise the kiddo, and I'm going to do it frequently, and I'm going to be really specific about how they earned my praise or my approval. And then there's the tangible category, which we often call the reward category, just in lay term, which is where we're going to provide the kid with reinforcers for exhibiting the replacement behavior. So we're looking at all of these categories as being important when we want to reinforce a kid for exhibiting replacement behaviors, but especially the vocal and tangible categories. Okay, so the vocal would look like we're checking in after each subject. That's how frequent it is, right? After each subject, we're going to check in and say, okay, Gage, let's see. Did you follow my directions the first time and get those sentences written on your paper? You did. Nice job, dude. And did you have a kind and quiet mouth? You did. Yep, I didn't hear any shouting out. And did you keep your hands and feet to yourself? Absolutely. You didn't touch anyone next to you. You were just holding your pencil and working on your paper the entire time. And I'm talking through that, not because I really need to talk through it and I don't know the answer, but because I want him to recognize that that's what I'm looking for in terms of his behavior. So I'm praising those replacement behaviors really specifically, right? If those were the 3 replacement behaviors I deemed as being most important, then I'm going to really specifically target those as I give that feedback after the subject. And of course, throughout the subject too, right? But that goes without saying that we're praising throughout as well as at the end. Okay, looking at the tangible category then, is we're going to try to match the reinforcer with the function of the behavior. So if we have a kid who's seeking attention, then we're going to try to give them attention as a reward. If we have a kid who's seeking escape, then we're going to try to give them ample escape as part of their reward, as part of their reinforcer. Here's the question teachers always ask though is, but Sarah, what if I don't know whether the student wants attention or escape? And that's a great question. My advice then would be to make your best guess because you know your students better than anyone, or to just try both, to try reinforcing both attention and escape, and hopefully you hit one of them or at least the one that's more dominant. I have on here consider Lottie, Ty, and Sky because I was in a classroom a couple of weeks ago where a teacher has 3 kids who are struggling behaviorally despite really strong classroom management for the whole group. And she said, okay, I've been thinking through these principles and trying to decide attention, escape, or both. And for Lottie, I feel like maybe it's attention because she just wants me to look at her and talk to her and stand by her and put little hearts on her paper for doing something well. Like she just craves my attention. Great, attention seeking. But Ty, I feel like he doesn't really care if I'm walking by him or if I'm patting him on the back or if I'm making eye contact with him. He just does not want to do his work. Okay, then that sounds like somebody who is seeking for escape, right? And then Sky, she said, Sky's hard because it seems like she does want my attention, but she also doesn't want to do her work. So it sounds like attention and escape maintained behavior for this kiddo. And that's pretty I point that out only to say like, yeah, it's common to have one of each in a classroom. That's not unusual, but we can do something that will work for each of these profiles. So stay with me, okay? The bottom line is, regardless of attention, escape, or both, complying with expectations has to become motivating in order for the kiddo to want to change the behavior. Because why would you change if the problem behavior is already getting you the rich attention and escape that you seek? I had a professor who said, a favorite professor who said, problem behavior is only a problem for the adults. The kids are doing just fine with it. It is absolutely getting them the attention and the escape that they seek. So we have to make sure that complying with our expectations becomes motivating for these kids. So here's some examples of reinforcers that you could use. Edibles, right? Like goldfish or gummy bears or Skittles or little Cheez-Its, something that you don't have to unwrap. And we pair that with our attention as we give the treat or the snack to the child and say, oh my goodness, you earned all your smiles for this morning. Do you want to pick 1 or 2 snacks from your little basket? Class jokes, that would be giving the kid attention as we maybe read 2 or 3 jokes on behalf of the kid in front of the class, and also escape because we're putting off work for a minute to do this. I've seen teachers who do a class errand where they ask the kid for earning their smiles if they would like to run an errand to the office or something. So giving the kid attention by the office staff or whomever the errand is run to, as well as escape from class temporarily. Teacher helper, wouldn't that be attention and escape? I get to help with the class task, so I get that public attention, but I'm also escaping whatever work maybe I would otherwise be doing at the moment. I have a teacher that did something this week that I thought was brilliant. She went and checked out a bunch of heavy encyclopedias from the library, put them on a dolly, wheeled them down to her classroom, put them in a box, and every time her difficult student earns his smiles, he gets to be the teacher helper and he gets to carry 2 of those books, 2 of those encyclopedias to the library, and the librarian just checks them back in and puts them on the shelf. It's not a real job, but he loves doing it. He feels very helpful, and it's improved his compliance in other areas because he's beginning to view himself as a helpful kid. A hallway walk. I've seen teachers do this successfully where they say, okay, if you earn your smiles, then you get to go on a walk in the hallway. And usually teacher and principal and parent agree on a route that the kid could safely take through the school. For instance, you can walk down to the fish tank at the end of the hall, the aquarium, and then walk back. So that would be, again, attention and escape, the attention from just hallway interactions and the escape from the classroom. An office visit, saying like, I earned my smiles, I get to go tell somebody in the office, again, attention and escape. Screen time, I don't love this one, but guess what? If it motivates the kiddo to begin exhibiting replacement behaviors, go for it. That's great escape if your kiddo is engaging in escape maintain behavior. Playtime, also great for kids who are seeking escape, a great reinforcer to let the kid play with Legos or Wedgets or some other hands-on tactile material if it's going to help them exhibit replacement behaviors. they can work for a prize. I had a little girl once who worked so hard for seashells that I had bought at the dollar store. They were so easy. They were so low prep, but high impact. So you pair that again with your attention by saying, oh my goodness, you're doing so well. Like, which seashell do you want? You can pick one. And then reduced work is also another reinforcer that you can use, where you allow the kiddo to escape from the task, but on your terms. So for instance, the teacher who said Ty just didn't want to do any work, what she started doing for him is saying, Ty, I've noticed you don't really like to do your work, but then you have to do it at recess. What if I just crossed out problems on your worksheet? Would that be okay if we tried just crossing some out so it's not so hard? And he was like, yeah. He was very excited about that and began completing the tasks because it wasn't quite so much. He was allowed to escape to some degree. Okay, I would encourage you when using reinforcers to consider putting them on a menu, and I'll show you an example of this in a second, but only showing 4 to 5 reinforcers at a time, 4 to 5 options, and then switching out 1 to 2 items every week just for sake of variety. I can't tell you how many times I've seen teachers who are using a really fabulous individualized behavior plan and it's falling flat because the kid has satiated to the reward, to the reinforcer, and they're just tired of it. And so we're going to switch out the items and give the kids choice of the items every week or so in order to maintain that variety and that motivation. So here's an example. An overall menu might look like this. And I know what you're saying. Like, Sarah, seriously, you just put sticky notes on a piece of paper? Yes, I did. Again, low prep, high impact. That's my favorite motto. So kiddo knows that they can earn a treat or snack, an office visit, a prize, screen time, an errand, jokes, playtime, teacher helper, stickers. That's really, part of a prize. A hallway walk, or I could have put on here less work, something like a worksheet then crossed out. But I don't want to cause choice paralysis, so these are the 5 that I'm going to put on for this week, and next week I'll trade them out for 5 more. Maybe I'll leave 1 or 2 of them on if I know the kid really likes those, but I'm going to give the kiddo weekly choices of reinforcers to work for. Here's a question that always comes up at this point is, but what about my other students? Aren't they going to want to act out too so that they can earn these rewards? And the answer is, surprisingly, not if the big 5 are solidly in place. If you have solid tier 1 classroom management in place, then this does not tend to domino affect other kids to begin acting out too. Also, it's important that you communicate that this is between you and your student. I saw a teacher once do this so beautifully. A little kiddo had just gotten a tracker. It was on his desk. The other kids were kind of noticing, and Miss Jensen, what is this for? Why is he doing this? And she said, oh, you know what? That's between me and Kai. You don't need to worry about that. That's just something he and I are working on. And she just kept going. And that tends to be enough. I have seen teachers who will have a conversation with a class and just say, yeah, we're just working on following directions. The best thing you can do is just continue being a good example, because that's something that Avery and I are working on. So you do have to do some level of communication about it. But if you have solid tier 1 management, then copycatting is not typically a risk. I will give you a quick tip that you can also use break cards if after the fact reinforcers are not enough to help fix the problem behavior. So if you realize that the kiddo can't wait until the end of the morning for a check-in to see if they've earned the reinforcer, then you could do break cards, especially if you know that that behavior is escape maintained. So I'll show you an example. I had a teacher who had 3 break cards on her student's desk for the AM and 3 for the PM. And the 2 green ones that say walking break card just meant that the student could walk a predetermined route in the school before coming back to her desk. And the red one, the red break card, meant she could go to an area in the back of the classroom, and there were sensory stimulation items and books and other things that she could look at back there, and she could choose if she wanted a 2, 3, or 4-minute timer to take an in-classroom break. And that was enough to help her get through the morning before they talked about reinforcers. And then same thing in the PM, 2 walking break cards and 1 classroom break card that she could use at any point during the afternoon. And all she had to do was pick it up and hand it to the teacher, and the teacher would give a thumbs up. Yep, go ahead. And then teachers always say, oh, but then they're not getting any work done. If they stand up in the middle of a math lesson and hand you a break card and they choose the 4-minute timer and go back to the classroom for a 4-minute break, the then they're not getting any work done. But very often my response to that is, yeah, but they weren't getting any work done anyway. These are the kids that are laying on the floor for 60 minutes of a math lesson anyway. So if she's going to take 4 minutes in the morning, 3 times, that's 12 minutes in the morning and 12 minutes in the afternoon, guess what? I'm okay with that, because my primary goal is to build compliance over time. Not perfection, just compliance over time is what I'm looking to increase. I think about it as the foundation of a house. The foundation of a house is so important. It doesn't matter how beautiful the finish work is if the foundation is weak. And the same is true behaviorally. If compliance is weak, if the student does not know how to or will not follow directions, nothing else will matter. So our goal is to build compliance so that someday we can get to the lovely finish work, or in other words, the lovely math lesson, right? I'm trying to get to that point where they will do their work, but I have to start with compliance. Okay, backing up though, do you recall expectations have to be supported by 2 types of feedback? The affirmative, right? The relationships and the affection and the praise and the reinforcers, but also the corrective feedback. So there's also 4 categories in the corrective feedback realm. There's the non-vocal, right? Where we use our proximity, or we indicate with facial cues or with gestures like signing no and frowning no. That's not okay. Paired usually with the vocal component, which is the vocal corrections. Remember, we talked about it needs to be given immediately in the face of the problem behavior. It needs to be specific, tell the student what to change, and it needs to be in a direct tone of voice. We're not apologetic, we're not harsh and reprimanding. It's just very direct. This is what I want instead. So we've talked about the non-vocal and vocal are still going to be really important, but the 2 pieces we're going to consider more carefully for a kid who's on an individualized plan would be redo and removal. Do you remember those? There is no hierarchy between the 2. The one that you choose depends on the situation. So we can have them redo a task like a worksheet. We can have them redo a transition like lining up, or we can have them redo an activity like we're going to practice walking into the lunchroom with your lunch tray and not touching anybody. And it doesn't matter that the lunchroom is empty now because everybody else is at recess and you're doing this after the fact. We're still going to practice what that activity looks like. Removal, remember, means we could remove our attention. I will talk to you when you want to be calm or when you want to raise your hand. We can remove the student to a different location. Maybe they're sitting up front by me and I'm going to have you go sit at this table on the side of the classroom until I think you're ready to follow directions. Or we can remove a privilege. I will have you go to recess after you finish this task. So step 4 then has to do with this corrective feedback step, and that is to be swift with redos and removals for infractions. I would say one of the biggest mistakes people make in these individualized behavior plans, at least in my experience, is they're not swift enough with implementing the consequence. I was in a classroom just a few months ago where the teacher made a comment to a kiddo about his behavior on the rug and said, "That is the 5th time I have asked you to be quiet." We should never ever get to the 5th time asking someone to do something. I will say it once, and then there will be a removal or a redo so that you know I mean what I say the first time I say it. So in the case of this kiddo on the rug, I might have said, "Jonah, I need your mouth closed," right? I'm stating what to change. I'm being immediate. I'm being direct. And he keeps talking, then I would do a removal. I would say, "Jonah, you're going back to your seat until I think you're ready to join me on the rug quietly." If he does not move, then guess what? I will do a redo of that behavior later. When the other kids go to recess or they're having a read aloud or they're getting ready for lunch or something, then I will practice that behavior again with him. But the idea is that engaging in the problem behavior has to become aversive to the student, because otherwise, why would they change? If the problem behavior continues to get them access to rich attention and escape, why would they change? Here's what it makes me think of. One of my favorite things to do in the whole world is go on walks in the evening in the summer. That is like something I love to do. But when I visit my cute sister in Wyoming, I don't like to do that because the mosquitoes are so rockin' bad that I will come inside from even a short walk and just be covered in mosquito bites, and they itch and they're miserable and they last for days and sometimes weeks. And so something that normally is very enjoyable for me becomes very aversive. And we're mimicking that idea that, yeah, you can choose to continue engaging in that problem behavior those emotional outbursts or not following directions or profanity, hostile language, whatever, but as the consequence lands, you will wish that you hadn't done that. And not because we're being harsh about it, but because the consequence is going to count. So a couple of examples in terms of the redo category. A kid scribbles on a worksheet or shreds it, then we're going to have them redo that worksheet at a time when the other kids are accessing a privilege. Pushing when it's time to line up, then we're going to practice lining up with hands and feet to self. Kid makes a mess in the lunchroom, then we're going to practice cleaning up the lunchroom and picking up garbage or, wrappers. I'm not saying like gross garbage, but practice picking items up when the other kids are at PE. Running, shouting in the hall, then we're going to practice how to walk quietly in the hall. The kid is pounding on the desk during flashcards, then we're going to practice doing flashcards during recess, and you're going to practice keeping your arms on top of your desk. Let's look at removals for just a second. Kid is making noises at the rug, then you can remove them back to their seats. Can you physically pick them up and lift them over to their seats? No, but you can tell them, I need you to go back to your seat. Poking or hitting peer. Oh, what am I going to do? They're poking or hitting their peer. I can't necessarily remove their peer, but maybe I can move them to a different area on the rug or in line if it's a problem with just that peer, or I could have them go back to their seat or to a different area in the classroom. I'm going to avoid the hall and the office because those are inadvertently reinforcing. Remember that? What if the kid is screaming in the bathroom? I saw a teacher once who didn't necessarily remove the bathroom privilege. She just delayed it. She said all the other kids are going to we're all going to walk down the hall together. All the other kids are going to go to the bathroom first and then be excused to walk out the recess doors. And this one kiddo has to wait until everyone else is done. And then he may use the bathroom because he was screaming and throwing things in the bathroom and being aggressive in the bathroom. So, okay, you can still use the bathroom, but I'm going to remove access to when you do it. Talking during every worksheet answer. I saw a teacher do this just so brilliantly the other day. She took a big eraser and just erased the kid's work and said, nope, it only counts if you do it quietly. Try it again. If the kid is whining for teacher attention, I'll talk to you when you're quiet, or I'll talk to you when you raise your hand, or I'll talk to you when you're using a calm voice, and I just remove my attention until that expectation is met. I will refer you back to Correct Me If I'm Wrong, parts 2 and 3, if you want to watch more in depth about redos and removals, okay, on this channel. Let me give you a crucial, I was going to call it a quick tip, nope, it's crucial, is that teachers should only dialogue with the child when he or she is communicating calmly. I was in a school the other day where a kiddo was so upset and was walking down the hall with an adult, somebody in the school, and was saying, no, I hate my mom, I hate her, I wish she was dead. And the adult was saying, no, you don't mean that. You love your mom and your mom loves you. No, I don't. I hate her. She's mean. No, we don't talk like that in school. We don't say things like that in school. And I knew that no amount of reasoning, no amount of logic or empathy is going to work with the kiddo at that point because he was so escalated. And that is just true of all kids, not just this one specific kid. If you have a kiddo who is really emotional and escalated and upset, then just say, we can talk about it as soon as you want to say it in a calm voice. I don't like my mom. Then I'll talk to you about it. But Sarah, should we have a conversation about a kid not liking his parents? Yeah, I'm willing to talk to you about anything as long as you're doing it in a calm voice. Until then, I'm going to remove my attention. Okay, wow. This has been like so long to get to this point, right? About setting clear expectations. What do those replacement behaviors look like? Affirming or praising, giving reinforcers when those expectations are met, correcting when they're not. Now, how do we put it all together? Can I show you what Gage did? Gage said he wanted to work for a treat that first day. He thought he could earn 3 smiles in the morning and 3 smiles in the afternoon. And so guess what? That first day, he did exactly that. He got 8 smiles overall. So he got the treat in the morning and maybe he picked that for the afternoon, or maybe he chose something else off the menu. It doesn't really matter. The idea is just that he had some idea of what he could earn once he got all of those smiles. Another crucial tip can I give you is if the student doesn't earn credit, don't ask why and don't reprimand. I see so often, I'm going to back up actually. So often, like say at recess, the kid struggles with keeping hands and feet to self, and teachers will say, well, why were you doing that? You know you're not supposed to. I've never yet heard a kid say, well, I struggle with impulse control, and it's just really hard for me to remember that I can't just do that to other kids or it doesn't make them feel safe. They don't go through and explain all of that logically. Guess what it does? It escalates the emotions. So don't ask why, and don't even reprimand and sit and make an X and say, well, you didn't do that one, so you earned an X in the box instead of a smile. That's going to escalate behavior. So what I would do instead, what I would recommend is, yep, you did line up right away when I blew the whistle, and you did use kind words at recess. Nice job. Thanks for that. There was still some touching in line, touching the other kids in front of you. So I'm going to circle that one, and we'll keep working on that one. Okay, so let's go to phonics, and we just move on. We don't stay in this realm of, so you didn't earn it. Isn't that hard? Don't you wish you had acted better? Nope. We're just going to state the reason why and move on. Which is what I say to do instead. How about that? State the reason that the credit is withheld and encourage continued effort. So we'll try again in whatever the next subject is. Okay, so day 2, Gage is still working for a treat. We set the same goal, 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, and he gets 9. Whoa, nice job. But here's what teachers say when they see this chart. So you're telling me he struggled all day with hurting other kids and he still got a reward? He still earned that reinforcer? Because look what he did. Recess, struggled with hands and feet to self. Prep, hands and feet to self. Science, hands and feet to self. And my answer is, yeah, he still got a reward because there was a different consequence for those infractions. But my goal, remember, my primary goal with a kid like this is to increase compliance. And in case you're wondering what that consequence was, it was that he had an assigned spot at recess, that he was only allowed to play on this blacktop area for a couple of days until I thought he could keep his hands and feet to himself, and then we gradually increased the parameters of where he could play over the next week. Okay, day 4, he decides he wants to work to be a teacher helper. He thinks he can get 3 smiles in the morning and 4 in the afternoon, and he does that. He gets 10 overall. Wow, that's awesome. Day 5, I want you to notice he was working for 4. He didn't get it. That's okay. He still got 3 in the afternoon, so he still got the reinforcer for the afternoon portion of the day. But what I'm doing in my mind is I'm keeping that number the same, those parameters the same for about 2, maybe 3 days at a time before I gradually increase by 1 number. So the next day I said again, do you want to work for 3 or 4 smiles in the morning, 3 or 4 smiles in the afternoon? And he chose 4. Despite having not gotten 4 the day before, he thought he could do it the next day. So, yep, that's fine. You could try to earn 4. And he got 11. That's incredible. He only missed following directions during prep. Day 9, he's working for 4 or 5 and he earns 11. Day 10, we increase it to 5 and 5. And when I say we, I mean I gave him a choice. Do you want to work for 4 or 5 in the morning? 4 or 5 smiles, and he chose 5. 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and he's choosing 5. Day 11, we choose 5 and 5 again as a goal, and he earns 12. He gets all smiles. He has essentially a perfect day. But this is so much work, right? As a teacher, you're thinking, I am checking in after every single subject and giving him specific feedback over how he did. And I love this Calvin and Hobbes strip. Who loves Calvin and Hobbes? Do you love Calvin and Hobbes? Miss Wormwood is saying it's not enough that we have to be disciplinarians. Now we have to be psychologists. And Calvin, as he's being carried to the office, is saying, your nefarious scheme will never succeed. I love that. But this leads us to step 5, that because it is so much work, because it is so intensive, we're going to fade the intervention over time, which is another way of saying we're going to gradually give the student less support. And why? Why would we do that? I think about my daughter when she was just learning to walk. Her dad and I had to help her with either 2 hands or 1 hand to just keep her steady. But eventually we were able to let go and look at this. As a toddler, she is just walking on her own 2 feet. She couldn't yet do a ropes course in the water, but by the time she's a teenager, yeah, she can do something like that. So the idea is we fade support behaviorally just like we would in any other area of life, just like we would with walking, just like we would with learning to drive, just like we would with learning to read or write. We're going to fade that support over time. So another way of saying that behaviorally is that we're going to decrease the richness and the frequency of praise. Maybe I'm still checking in with Gage after every subject, but I'm saying something like, okay, so you followed directions, you had a kind mouth, kept hands and feet to self. Nice job, dude. Mark your smile. So it's less rich. I'm also increasing the quantity of points required to access the reinforcer. Remember that first day, he only had to earn 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon. By day 12, we're up to 5 in the morning, 5 in the afternoon. But we're always giving credit to the student for being ready to handle something harder. I'm never saying, okay, you got 3 yesterday, you did it so easily. Today, I think you can earn 4. Yep, you have to get 4, because if we phrase it that way, we're setting ourselves up for a battle. Instead, we say something like, you are ready to handle 4. Do you want to pick 3 or 4 today? And when they say 4, awesome, love it. If they don't pick 4, they stay at 3, that's fine. But a couple days later, okay, you can pick 4 or 5. What do you pick? Because I know you can handle something harder. Give credit to them for being ready for that. Okay, so day 13, Gage decides he wants to work for an errand, and look what we've done. We've said we're just going to set an overall daily goal of 9 instead of a morning and an afternoon goal. So that's another way to make it easier, is I'm just working for one reinforcer at the end of the day, and he earns 10, not just 9 of his smiles. By day 14, the goal is 9, he earns 11. Day 15, the goal is 10, he earns 10, he barely makes it. Day 17, the goal is 10, he earns 12. Day 18, the goal is 11, he earns exactly 11. Day 19, the goal is 11 and he earns 12. So he's earned 12 a couple of times now, which makes me think, okay, maybe he's ready for more fading. Maybe we can try not using the chart. So we do that on day 20, and it just felt like a simmering volcano all morning. Like he was just so on edge and so heightened the entire morning. And by that afternoon, nope, we had completely lost any ground we had gained from before. So day 21, guess what? We're going to go back to the tracker. Our goal is 9. I'm going back to that original overall daily goal, but I'm still going to try to fade as quickly as I can. So this was day 21. The goal is 9. Day 22, I'm already going up to 10, saying, I think you can earn 10 or 11 smiles. What do you pick? He picks 10, and he earned 12. Day 24, his goal is 11, he earns 11. Day 25, his goal is 11 and he earns 12. Day 26, his goal is 10 and he earns 11. Day 28, 11 or 12. And how did that happen? Because as he was being so successful, he started saying, Miss Smith, I want to try to earn 12. I hesitate to ever set the goal at perfection though, because if you lose it even once, especially early in the day, what have you got left to work for? So what I do in a case like that is say, okay, if you want to earn 12, that is awesome. I'll write it on there, but my goal for you is 11. And if you earn 11, that's great for me. But if he did it, he earned 12. And then by day 29, the goal is still 11 or 12. But I want you to notice at the end of that day, I said to him, Gage, you ready to come check out? That's what I called it. You ready to come check out and do your tracker? And he was like, no, I'm okay. Bye. And just walks out the door. So that tells me that maybe he's ready for more fading. If he's not really concerned about earning those reinforcers, then maybe we can try backing off the chart again. So day 30, that's what we do. And it wasn't a volcano, but it was definitely a cloudy day. There was definitely some turmoil going on. So the next day when he says, Miss Smith, can I have my chart again? Guess what my answer is? Yep, sure. If that's what you need in order to be successful behaviorally, I am happy to put that in place for you. But look what we're doing on day 31. Our goal is still 11 or 12, right? But we're checking in after every 3 subjects or after chunks of subjects instead of after every single subject. Day 35, we're checking in once in the morning, we're checking in once in the afternoon, and look what happens again is he walks out without wanting to do the check-in. Just, I'm okay. So day 45 plus, what we're doing is just sporadic check-ins. On days that he says, Miss Smith, can I use my chart today? My answer is, yep, sure. But we're still checking in maybe once in the morning and once in the afternoon to review each of those subjects individually. Let's see, how'd you do in writing? Yep, got your work done. How'd you do in phonics? Yep, you did a nice job in phonics at recess, kept your hands and feet to yourself, mark your smile. And we're just doing kind of quick check-ins for the overall day because I know he's been successful. But what if your student is not likely to be successful for an entire subject at a time? In that case, I would just consider shorter intervals, right? These are both interval trackers that we're going to talk about today. But one is a subject interval, it's a set amount of time, and this one that I'm going to show you next would be more variable. And In other words, you're going to follow the same steps, but you're going to deliver points throughout the subject instead of waiting until the end. So this is an example of what happened for a little gal I worked with named Ella. Her teacher said she wanted her to work on staying in her seat, using a quiet mouth, and getting her work done, because academically she was very capable of that. And as she exhibited those 3 behaviors, she would earn a smile or a check or a star or a heart, whatever you want, in the box. And what the teacher had done is said, okay, I think she can be successful for probably 3 minutes at a time because I'm like reprimanding her every 4 or 5 minutes. So, okay, we're setting our timer then on this motivator for 3 minutes, and every 3 minutes it's going to just give a little buzz at our hip. And if Ella has exhibited these 3 replacement behaviors, then we're going to let her mark a smile in the box. And when the entire chart is filled up, then she earns the reinforcer. Jack was one that was struggling to follow directions and have a quiet mouth. So those are the 2 replacement behaviors his teacher identified. And then she didn't use a motivator. She used an interval timer on her phone. So it's called the HIIT, the HIT timer, and it works the same way. You can choose the intervals and it will just give you a little ding on your watch or, in your back pocket whenever the interval is up. And then you're going to make the following modifications. Okay, if you're using interval charts like this, you want to predetermine the number of tokens or points that has to be reached. So in Ella's case, it was 10. In Jack's case, it was 20. Could you even split it up and do it row by row every 5? Sure, yep. But the frequency of points is going to depend on the frequency of problem behavior. You want to stay ahead of it. So where Ella could only be successful for 3 minutes at a time, or her teacher said about 4 or 5 minutes at a time, then we're setting the interval for 3 minutes so that we stay ahead of it. For me, it's like my daughter who has to have protein. If I can stay ahead of her protein intake, she's a pretty pleasant kid. But if she starts to be sassy or emotional or upset, then I know, okay, this kid needs protein. So same idea. Letter B, we want to deliver the reinforcer as soon as the predetermined number is reached. As soon as that chart is filled up, we are delivering whatever reinforcer the kid has picked from the menu. So make sure it's something that they can have right away. Can I say this again? Deliver the reinforcer as soon as that predetermined number is reached. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a teacher and that was the only problem, is that they were delaying the reinforcer until the end of the day when it was convenient to give it to the kid. And all we had to do was change the immediacy of delivery of reinforcement for the system to work. And then letter C is that you would gradually increase the length of interval to fade the intervention. So I'm not saying you have to earn more points. I'm just letting you go for longer and longer intervals before I have you mark a smile and before you then access the reinforcer. Okay, quick tip. Instead of writing what the student is working for on the tracker, because you tend to go through these more quickly, I would just keep the menu readily available so that when they do fill up their chart, they can just go pick off the menu, I want a prize, and they go back to the prize bucket and pick a little eraser, right? Or a little seashell or something that's just really easy and affordable from the dollar store, whatever it is they work for. Okay, couple questions teachers ask. At what point do I involve the parents? I would say as soon as you realize that this is that one kid. As soon as you realize that, then make the phone call home. But not to say, wow, what have you been doing all your life as a parent? This is a rockin' mess. We're not saying that. We're saying, I've seen some struggle with XYZ, report the behaviors that you've seen being problematic. So we're going to try XYZ. We're going to try this instead. In other words, we want to be solution focused versus accusatory when we're talking to parents. I want to try using a tracker. I want to try having your child work on these 3 behaviors. And as they do that, I have some little rewards they can earn that are just easy and simple. And we set the kids up for working towards something and not as being, not as having character deficits. At what point do you ask the principal to intervene? I would say if the behavior becomes unmanageable or unsafe. But I would give you a note here that you want to use the principal to support in the delivery of the consequence versus being the consequence him or herself. So you wouldn't just say, nope, you haven't been earning your smiles, or you had a hard time at recess, so you're going to go to the principal and I'll let him decide what to do with you. It would be, when I think you're ready to do your work, then I'll invite you to come back to class. But right now I'm going to have you go sit at the office in the, the special little room next to the principal's office to do your work or whatever, and tell the principal as soon as Ethan does his work, then he can go back to the classroom. But you have the principal's support with the consequence. The principal is not the consequence in and of himself, if that makes sense. What if your support still isn't working? What if the behavior is still not improving despite your best efforts? Then I would say you got to do something really hard. Ask for feedback. Say, what am I doing wrong that somebody else could help me look at? And or team help. And probably if you're at this point, you've already done that, right? If you're watching this video, you're a person that's already said okay, I've identified a problem. I've probably done all I can. But sometimes it really is a tweak as simple as deliver the reinforcer immediately. Okay, principle number 3 is that one kid can change. I had a teacher who said to me once, is any of this even worth it? At any point, is this kid actually going to change, or behaviorally, are they just going to struggle their entire life? No, that kid can change, but there's a big red if. And it depends on, have you determined the most problematic behaviors? Have you really, really clarified what those replacement behaviors should look like? Are you reinforcing compliance of those replacement behaviors? And are you super swift with redos and removals so that it becomes aversive to the kid to exhibit the problem behaviors? And then are you fading the intervention over time so that the kiddo becomes behaviorally independent? That one kid can change if these steps are in place. In 2nd grade, I remember Gage's teacher came to me and and said, isn't he the kid who used to struggle? And I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time, because the answer was yes, he did. He struggled and he came so far. He did so well. But it took so much work. And for you to just be didn't he used to struggle, feels a little bit non-validating. Okay, in the guided notes, there are 2 resources for you, a subject tracker and the interval tracker with directions for use. Not that you would have to use these exactly, but just as a springboard to get you going. And then as always, last question, what did you like or learn about helping that one kid? Can I tell you for me what it is? It's that helping students overcome problem behavior requires a more intensive version of the expectation model, which looks like this. Remember the expectation model? If I want a kid who's struggling behaviorally to be successful, then I have to be clear about my expectation in the form of a tracker. I have to provide that affirmative feedback in terms of the reinforcers as well as the other kinds of reinforcement, but especially the reinforcers. And I have to have that corrective component in place as well in terms of redo and removal. For me, I love to simplify it down to this level. I'm looking at the expectation model on a very individualized level, and that's how I help these kiddos improve and become successful behaviorally and probably academically, socially, emotionally, mentally, you name it, right? Okay, thanks for watching. Maybe more videos about helping that one kid at some point, but that's it for now. Okay, bye.